Welcome to the 7th edition of the Living History of Cafh. I am Libby Kerr, and along with Bill Poner, your host for today. The focus of today's interview is the journey to Cafh of 4 community members from Yorktown Heights and Tivoli, New York.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. It's great to see you all. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few points that will allow you to ask questions and give feedback. First, the Zoom chat offers interaction in real time. Your questions, comments, and greetings in the chat will be forwarded to the interviewees. Anything not addressed in the allotted hour and 15 minutes will be responded to after the interview. Please take a moment after the interview to click on the feedback link in the chat area. Your feedback helps guide future episodes of the Living History of Cafh and is much appreciated.
The Living History of Cafh interview series is the work of volunteer members from around the world. The idea sprang from a 2019 interview of Alicia Brogna and Ahenia Medawar. With this interview, there was the realization that many of these personal journeys needed to be shared not to duplicate the journey, but to show the diversity of individual responses to life. Through these interviews, we see ourselves. We connect to the search of the soul for answers, and we grow as we expand the possibilities.
Today, we are interviewing Madeline Barry and Paulette Sink from the community of Yorktown Heights, New York, and William Dailey and Leonard Ross from the community of Tivoli in New York. The interviewers today are Lourdes Delgado from Yorktown Heights and Lung Chunkali from New York City. It is our pleasure to give a very warm welcome to Madeline, Paulette, William, and Leonard.
Welcome everybody to this interview. My name is Lourdes and I will be with Len interviewing our 4 special guests today. Len.
Thank you, Lourdes. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Lynn, and I just want to mention that some of you may be wondering why we have invited these 4 particular people to be in this interview together. And one reason is that when they were young adults, they all traveled to Colombia in South America for different reasons, and they met each other there. And while there, they also encountered Cafh. This is of particular interest to me because I had the same experience. Although a little bit after them, I also traveled to Cali, Colombia, and I found Cafh there. And Bill, who you just heard from, lived in Colombia where he encountered Cafh. So we found that very interesting, and we wanted to find out what the special thing that was going on in Colombia at that time. That will be part of our interview today, part of the story we're going to learn. Another part is about their experience in community. So now, turning to our guests, and to begin our interview, I'd like to ask each of you just a little bit about yourselves. And I'm going to ask Madeline to start us off. If you could please just tell us where you're from, which communities you've lived in, and maybe for how long you've been in Cafh. Madeline?
Thank you, Lynn. Well, I was born in Indiana, which is right smack in the middle of our country. But I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Arlington, Virginia. I entered Cafh in 1973, and I entered the community and Cafh in 1973. And I entered in Montebello. And very soon that community in Montebello morphed or moved to Wildemar. From Wildemar in January of '77, we drove Wildemar is in Southern California. We drove Senor Jorge, Joan, myself, Ellen, the son. We drove to Costa Rica and founded the community in Costa Rica. I lived there for 10 years and then returned to the United States in '87 to the community in New York, in Yorktown. I've been in Cafh and the community for for 48 years, to be exact.
Thank you, Madeline. William, could you tell us a little as well?
Sure. I have to hold my microphone up so you can hear me, I think. I was born in Massachusetts, a little bit south of Boston. Ended up going, as you said, to Cali for different reasons. There I found Cafh and I entered the community of San Gabriel, which was near Popayan, a little bit north of Popayan. It was the men's community in Colombia. I lived there for maybe 15 years. I don't remember exactly what the dates were. And then that community left and transferred to Cali because of some social unrest, I guess you would say. And I was there in Cali for 5 years maybe. And then in 1990, I came back to the United States to the community of Tivoli, where I'm still at.
Thank you, William. Paulette, could you tell us a little about where you're from?
Sure. I was born in Los Angeles. I grew up there on the west side. And I, as you know, I entered Cafh in Cali, and I actually entered the day before Madeline went to the community. I knew Madeline through Cafh. So I took her place in the table there in the sponsored maidens. And then I went to the community. That was in February, the end of February in 1973. And I went to the community in September of that same year. It was the community of Montebello at that time. There had been already founded a community in Wildemar. It was founded by men, but the sons left. I don't know why, but they left. So the Montebello daughters took care of that community. It was about, I guess it's a couple of hours south of Los Angeles where we were. And so some daughters moved at some point, I think in 1974. Most of the daughters moved from Montebello to Wildemar, and some of us stayed in Montebello until it closed in 1976, just before they were going to go to Costa Rica. So I went to Wildemar in 1976, and then in 1979, I was one of the daughters who founded the community in Yorktown, New York, and I've been there ever since. So I've been in Cafh and the community about 48 years.
Thank you, Paulette. Leonard, could you tell us where you're from and the communities you've been in?
So I was born in Kansas City and grew up there 18 years. And then again, I pretty much like the others, I found Cafh in Cali at the same time and entered Cafh at the same time. I think I entered the community like more or less a year after, in San Gabriel, more or less a year after William. And then in '79, the community in Tivoli here near Red Hook, north of New York City, we founded that, and I've been here ever since.
Thank you all. We're going to continue now. Lourdes has a question for you.
Yes, I noticed that each of you arrived to Colombia in the early 1970s for different reasons. Paulette, can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to Colombia? What was your spiritual search, if any? And what were you doing?
Well, I was just trying to escape the very bitter cold of Montana, the Rocky Mountains, It was going to be winter there. It starts snowing there around September. So the idea was just to go to a warm place. And a friend and I traveled together to visit somebody that my friend knew who was had been in the Peace Corps. My friend had been in the Peace Corps too, but that was a different years, different situation. So we went to this farm in Santa Marta, which is on the north coast of Colombia, right by the Caribbean, and so these people in Colombia had a farm, and they took advantage of us being there to leave and go visit some friends from the Peace Corps in Cali. So we were there about a month, and then they came back all excited about this path they had found. And it was, they talked about the books and the people that they had met, and they were all enthusiastic. We were going to go home after that month, but we decided, well, we were kind of looking for something. I mean, it really kind of, interested us. So we traveled by bus down to Cali and met more people, and they were all interested in Cafh. It was really the people I met at first were aspirants. I mean, and they were a lot of Americans. I didn't speak a word of Spanish, neither of us did. And right at that time, Manuel Agustin, who was the founder of Cafh in the United States and the delegate of New York, he had been sent, I guess, by Senor Jorge to Cali to find out what was going on, because there were all these Americans there and many of them interested in the community. So that was great for me because he came and there was a big group of us, and he spoke in English and just described a little bit about Cafh. And I at that time I met Juan Carlos Calderon. I just met him. I couldn't speak to him because I didn't know Spanish. So that's how, and then I was very interested. I just, it's like once I found Cafh, I just knew it was for me. And so I just knew I was just waiting till they would let me enter, and I was waiting until they would let me go to the community.
How interesting, from Nebraska to Cali and finding your path. Thank you. I'm wondering, William, do you want to tell us?
Sure.
What brought you to Colombia?
If I can remember what happened. Well, I was in the Peace Corps. Also, it was the time of Vietnam, and graduate from college. And I remember seeing a sign that said, "Now that you've got your degree, get an education. Go to the Peace Corps." So there was a good alternative for me. I went, and I ended up going to Colombia. It was the first time I'd ever left the United States. Mm-hmm. I was there for 2 years, which is a normal stint in the Peace Corps. And I worked in agriculture with potato farmers in the very south of Colombia, in the mountains there near the border with Ecuador. And then at the end of those 2 years, I went back to the United States. Actually, I bought a motorcycle in Panama and drove up through Central America and Mexico, up the West Coast to California, and up to see my sister in Seattle, and then across the country to where my parents lived in Massachusetts. And but things had gotten a little bit out of kilter by that time. I wasn't really into anything that was going on there, and didn't really know what to do with myself. So I went back to Colombia I got an extension, went back for a third year there in Colombia. And I'll say this for Bob Magrisso, if he's around still. There's a song, there's a lyric in a Bob Dylan song that says, "I've been trying to get as far away from myself as I can," which I would say that's more or less what I was trying to do at that point. I didn't know what to do. So I was the third year in Colombia was quite different. We lived in a small city in the south of Colombia called Pasto. And it was on the Pan American route through anybody who was going north or south to Chile, to Peru, or any of those places, or coming up from there, always went through where we lived, and it was sort of on the map for everybody. So we lived in a house. There was a Dutch girl there. There were 3 Swedish people. There were some people from California. I don't know what they were doing exactly, and people who came through all the time, either going south or going north, traveling. You know, young people looking for something. And at the end of that period was when I got kind of swept up with everyone else. Like Madeline was there in Pasto also, and we had met Paulette and some other people, and Ellen was there also. Ellen was in Costa Rica. She was a friend there. And at the end of that, we all moved to Cali. I moved to Cali because my tour was over, and I got a job with a friend there as a carpenter, or doing odd jobs just to make enough money to stay alive. And from there, what was the question actually?
What you were doing? You are doing.
No, that's okay. That's what I was. That's what I was doing. So it was. Yeah, I guess that's the end of that. That's the answer to that question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very, very nice. Madeline, do you want to tell
Well,
us something?
William, you didn't tell about meeting Calderon and Cafh and all that.
Yeah.
I thought that was the next question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You
So
can do it here.
I can do it here. Okay.
Yeah.
So there, you know, I wasn't looking for any spiritual path, and actually, I was trying to avoid it at all costs. I had been brought up in a non-religious type situation, and I was really turned off by all the spiritualistic stuff. So when people started talking to me, you know, saying, "Whoa, we found this," you know, I didn't want to hear anything about it. But with the contact with all the people, the friends there, there was a wonderful guy, a couple of wonderful people. One of them was an architect there in Cali who spoke English and who was very gregarious, very outgoing, very great person. He ended up actually going to the community there in Cali, but he was sort of the nexus for everybody who came there to meet Calderon, who was the delegate of Cafh there in Cali. And one of the things I remember is when I met Calderon, I was very skeptical, and I still am a little bit. What I thought was, this guy knows what I want to know. Somehow that's what I felt, that he knew what I wanted to know. And that sort of opened up the thing for me. And I didn't join Cafh really. I don't know why. He didn't want to let me into the table. I didn't want to really get into the table, to tell you the truth. And so in the end, I was working there. He knew me. I was talking to Antonio Gonzalez, who is a wonderful person. This guy is generosity himself. I heard in the practice we did that he's still alive. Wonderful guy. I talked to him for a long time about what life was about and all that. And so one day, another fellow that was there in working in the hospital for Tulane University was Michael Danziger. He had gotten a pickup truck to be able to get all of his stuff out there to San Gabriel, because he was joining the community also. So somebody called me, I don't know who it was, Calderon or who, and said, "Look, if you want to go, Michael's going, get your stuff and go." So I got my stuff and I threw it in the back of the pickup truck, and we both went there. I don't know, I don't remember for sure if they knew I was coming or not. Jose Maria can probably tell us. I think they know Michael was coming, but they were surprised that I was coming, and I sort of crashed it a little bit there. And should I go talk more about that, or that was what I did in Cali? The rest of it was in the community. You know?
Yes, but thank you. It's so interesting to see how you get that right, and you say yes because you know that could be for you. Thank you, William.
Sure.
I am wondering, Madeline, do you want to tell us what brought you to Colombia?
Sure. It's interesting how different our journeys are or were. In order to tell the story, I need to go back a bit. Growing up, I always felt kind of on the fringe of things. I never quite identified with what everybody else was doing. And the one thing, though, I grew up in Catholic schools, and I was very attracted to the idea of the consecrated life. In fact, ever since I can remember, I told everybody I wanted to be a nun. And for many years, I searched, I investigated, I looked, I even visited some different convents, but nothing seemed right. I didn't resonate with anything. So I gave up. And I was aware that there was this, like, I guess the best way to describe it would be this emptiness, that I had this emptiness inside, this yearning for something. I mean, now we have different vocabulary words. We can call it maybe yearning for happiness or for fulfillment. I don't know. But I would look around and everybody was trying to put different things into it. Travel, experiences, studies, all kinds of things, but nothing really fit. So I went off to college, and well, that's a whole other story. But anyway, I was really bored. And I remember walking through the science building. And I was at the University of Virginia at that time. This is like, what, 69, 70? Virginia was so advanced. They had the men on one campus and the women on another. So I was wandering the halls, kind of like, what am I going to do? Nothing seems worth it. And I saw on the bulletin board, there was a little postcards. Again, the same thing that William said. Got your degree? Come get an education. Join the Peace Corps. There's this new program. So I said, let me send it in. So I sent it in, and I actually got an answer. And I kept sending the forms back. And the next thing I knew, I was accepted to a Peace Corps college degree program. It was for sophomores and juniors, science and math majors. Get Peace Corps training. We'll give you a year of college. Come. And I thought to myself, great. At the very least, I'm going to meet interesting people. At the very least, and maybe I can do something worthwhile with my life instead of what I'm doing right now. And after a lot of serendipitous experiences, I ended up in Colombia. I was in Pasto, and as William explained, it was sort of the center on the Pan American Highway, everybody coming through. And I finished the 2 years and went, what am I going to do now? And it was interesting because I remembered that one of the professors that I knew in college very casually said, oh, I've done absolutely everything there is to do. I did this experience and that experience and the other experience. And I remember thinking to myself, well, you aren't very happy. So for what good was it? You know, where is this happiness? Where is this fulfillment? What's it all about? So when I was in Cali, trying to figure out what to do, I went to a party. Michael Danziger had the party. I didn't really know anybody there, but there were, you know, things you do at the party, different games, the tarot. We were doing different things. And after a while, Rodrigo, who is a young man, approached me and he said, I have somebody I think you would like to meet. I said, sure, why not? And he took me to meet Calderon. And that moment really changed my life completely. And I'll tell you the rest of it the next time.
Thank you. Well, now we go to Leonard and we want to hear the next of the story. But Leonard, what brought you to Colombia?
This is a story it's almost impossible to tell. Somewhere it says it's like you're trying to dig a hole in the sea and everything you touch just sort of evaporates. I feel like I'm about to throw myself off a mountain slope on the snow and kind of work my way down. So it'll come out like it comes out. I'm trying to squeeze an awful lot into a small space, and the spin on the narrative just gets, I don't think I can say it twice the same way. So like Madeline said, I'll go back some. I'm in Kansas City. I got bar mitzvahed. I got really sick. I was in the hospital, almost died. Went to a music camp, and then we're singing. We were in among the things we were doing. I wasn't a singer, but we were in a chorus, and we sang some words, the splendor of the morn and the radiance of noon. Well, you say, well, so what? But for whatever reason, I had been potentialized inside, and that was like a little catalyst to just set off an explosion in me. And I just went nuts. And afterwards, I considered myself an agnostic. I was trying to understand many things. So skip forward several years. I leave Kansas City. I go to California to school. Then afterwards, I go to England. I'm in school, and I'm hitchhiking around Scotland. Some tremendous storm in Scotland, out all night. I go through France and Spain into Morocco. In a bazaar in Morocco, this little beggar girl comes up, and somebody had given me a sandwich, and I figured it was a scam, but she was like begging, so I gave her a piece of the sandwich, and she popped it in her mouth, and before a second had gone by, she ran off with terror that I was going to take it back. And obviously that still moves me a lot. I would have done anything. So I came back to the United States, and like William said, I think there was like a tremendous culture shock, like somebody had hit me in the solar plexus. And I was last year in school, and it was Vietnam, and I was being drafted, and I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to actually go, because I'd been interested in that for a long time, and part of me imagined that I couldn't voluntarily put myself in that situation where I would be obligated to do certain things. And I'd been studying that stuff. I was interested in politics, international relations very deeply. Anyway, so I wasn't a part of any Jehovah's Witness or any kind of a group that would recognize me as a conscientious objector. But finally, I just said, look, I'm objecting conscientiously, so the definition has to include me. And that was the end of it. And I settled that in my mind. And I was able to eventually get that. But meanwhile, I think things somehow, I don't know whether the human mind tries to find patterns in things. Sometimes there's a pattern of a low and a high or things that come together. At one moment, this intensity, the stress and everything, incredible amount of frustration, and I burst like a dam and I was sobbing. But the thing is, it wasn't just a personal sobbing. It was like I was experiencing images of people and sorrow all over the world. It was that human suffering that was touching me very deeply. Later, I had, or I don't remember the sequence, I was studying paradigms and philosophy of history and structure of scientific revolutions, I don't know what. And I suddenly had an insight, and that insight served like a initiated chain reaction. I had an experience, and I can't explain that to this moment. It was like just transported me. And after, I didn't know what it was, but afterwards I found that I knew words like rapture and ecstasy and mysticism, but I didn't know them. Really, they weren't part of my everyday vocabulary. And that fundamentally shifted me, like the magnetism of what I was doing. And so anyway, I went to, and I'm squeezing all sorts of things. I hitchhiked, hiked across the country. I got to conscious objector. I ended up working in the emergency ward in Boston City Hospital. I was living nearby on my own in a sort of a poor section, trying to figure things out. Many things happened, and somehow everything exploded. It was a concatenation of events that came together that kind of moved me out of that situation. And I had to find my destiny, find how to live. I couldn't not respond. And somehow I must have been very convincing, because even the draft board accepted that it sounds mad, but that's what he's going to do. And so I took off, and you say, well, how in the world do you do that? How do you find a teaching, a master? How do you find a path? I didn't know. And making decisions one day after the next. And I went to a big anti-war demonstration in Washington. I went to Cape Cod. I was sleeping on the beach. I went to Maine. I went up into Canada. I crossed Canada. I came back down. I don't know, I crisscrossed the country 2-3 times, hiking, experiences. I was tremendously restless and with a wanderlust. I couldn't be anywhere for more than a few days, few weeks at the maximum. Also, I got very sick. I was working it through. Somebody told me, hey, why don't you go to sea? I didn't know what to do with myself. So, okay. So he said, go get yourself down to Mazatlan in Mexico, get on a boat, go to sea. So, okay, I figured I'd get on a boat. I'd work myself where? To Europe, to Africa, to Asia, where? To Israel, to Tibet. I didn't know, somewhere. So I did get to Mazatlan. I went to Puerto Vallarta. All my things were stolen. Anyway, I did get on a boat. Somebody was going to Spain. I figured I'd get somewhere, but we got in a tremendous storm off the Gulf of Tehuantepec. I got off in Costa Rica. I'm sorry to be so long-winded. I'm squeezing this stuff really quick. It's really like a roller coaster ride. I mean, I can't remember exactly what happened when. It was such a kaleidoscope of spinning stuff. I crossed in Costa Rica, to San Jose, later to Puerto Limon. They told me I had something to do with finding the property that they yet later found in Costa Rica for the community, but I never got that straight. I met different people. Most of the time I was staying away from Americans. I was just trying to be with the people in the country I was in. I got to work my way down to Panama, and again, looking for a boat, couldn't find one. So I met some people and they had somehow hooked up with some smugglers that were going to cross through the Darien jungle between Central America and South America. So I went with them and I, crossed through the jungle, the Colombia. I had, a small backpack and a machete and long hair and a beard. And I was wearing mariner's pants, which all full of different patches. I thought it was like a Sufi or something like that. And the guy at the immigration there put me down as an adventurer or a yogi. I don't remember, or both. So somehow we got down to, we were crossing through the river Atrato in a small boat. All these small people, completely different ethnicities and faces, black, white, in between. And it was on top of South America, and there was lightning and a storm over here and the sunset over here and what do they call it? The golden hour light over here and off the waves and everything. It was just an incredible moment. I just kept spinning around looking at this beauty. So I worked my way down. I got to Medellin. I said, well, I'll try to learn some Spanish since I'm here. I didn't want to be there, but I said, okay, maybe I'll meet a Don Juan, or I had images of El Topo or something. And so I worked my way down, learned Spanish, worked my way down and around and up into Brazil, learned Portuguese, and then across to Africa or somewhere, I'll get somewhere. And again, I'm on a search. One thing led to another, and I got to Cali. I was in Bogota, Medellin, and Manizales, and I got to in Manizales. There was a moment where I was with somebody, and we were looking into each other's eyes, and it was like this other person was looking back at me, my eyes looking back at me out of his face. And then that started happening with other people. I was like, "Wow, what's going on here?" Anyway, I got to Cali and I met somehow Michael Danziger and Rodrigo, and I slept on their floor. I think Gene Langdon was there. We talked and we argued and talked and argued. And at the end, Michael said, I want you to meet somebody. I said, well, okay. And that was Calderon. And so I met Calderon and we talked and we argued and talked and argued. And I could hardly speak. I spoke a little bit of French, very little Spanish. Michael figured this guy is a complete loser, stubborn. He's never going to get it. Calderon asked me, so you want me to kill you mystically? I said, yes. I was afraid.
He was afraid.
I was afraid, but I said, yeah, because he understood somehow. He understood that's what I was looking for. And he said, and he knew that I was getting ready to split anyway, because I hadn't stayed anywhere for more than a few weeks in a couple of years. This was like I was running downfield in a football thing and somebody tackled me. Wow. Okay, so he said, run, Leonardo, run for 1,000 years, run for 10,000 lives. I have my hook in you. I won't let you go. So it wasn't so simple, but finally something in me recognized, which is the amazing thing, recognized and decided in a way that I myself didn't. And after a while, I kind of had to acknowledge that decision had already been made in me by me, some other part of me. And that's the short, sweet story.
Thank you. It's incredible how all that traveling and that you were in the right place there just to do what it needed. So thank you, Leonard, for all your description. Len?
Yes, thank you. Now I'm going to ask each of you, and this time I'll start with William. If you could describe how Cafh touched you at that moment in your lives when you encountered it. And I know this is hindsight, reaching back into your memories. But if you can remember, what could you tell us about that experience? Maybe it was some of your first experience in the community, or the people you encountered there, which you've already told us a little bit, or the experiences you had finding out about Cafh and how it spoke to you. We can elaborate a little more on what you've already told us. So William, could you start us off on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I told you when I talked to Calderon, I realized somehow I understood that he knew what I wanted to know, and I had I had bounced around a lot, and it was like somehow life gave me anything that I wanted practically, and everything that it gave me was not what I was looking for. So it was like as if like we'd say in the Cafh, the Divine Mother said, "Okay, try this. Okay, try that. Try the other. You want to do this? Okay, do this." But nothing really made any sense to me or satisfied whatever I was trying to accomplish. And when I went to the community, I didn't know anything about Cafh really. I mean, I talked to Calderon quite a bit and to Antonio Gonzalez a lot, but I'd never been to a Cafh meeting or anything like that. And so when I arrived in the community was a very strange place. I mean, not the physical community. The physical community was beautiful, you know. But I don't want to hurt Jose Maria's feelings here. But there I was in people wearing capes, a very harsh discipline, you know, a strict schedule, study and prayer and meditation and work and over and over and over again, the same thing all the time. And I'm sure that most of them thought that I wasn't going to last. But there were people there. Rodrigo, like I said before, he was there. And other people came and went, and they sort of helped me to hang on there through the first few weeks or months. You know? And finally, it dawned on me that all of that exterior stuff, all of the schedule and the discipline and the rule and the ceremonial and all that stuff, it wasn't that important to me. What was important was that everything that happened to me, because of the method and because of the teaching in Cafh and because of the way we lived and how we focused on things, everything that happened to me taught me something. And like I said before, like you're trying for a long time, I was sort of trying to get away as far away from myself as I could, looking everywhere except inside. And then when I went to the community, I was forced to look inside, and I was given the opportunity, to look inside. And that's when I figured that this is it. This is what I was looking for. The strangest thing you could possibly imagine, or I could possibly imagine, and that was it. Because I'd sort of found the door to myself, to who I was. And that was it. The others will probably tell you the same something along the same lines. It's like, it was something that I understood, but it wasn't just understanding. It wasn't anything it wasn't my mind telling me, yeah, this is it. No, it was something beyond that. That the mind just couldn't reach and touch something like that. It was out there somewhere else, somewhere deeper. And that's something that's always sustained me in the community and in Cafh. That's it.
I like how you described that you found the door to yourself. It's a lovely way to put that.
Thank you.
Thank you, William. Madeline, could you continue? Tell us about
The
what
story
moved you about
continues,
Cafh.
no?
Yeah.
Well, so I met Calderon, and I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't really thinking. Rodrigo just said, well, I have someone I want you to meet. And I was really touched, moved. And it's hard to describe exactly why. I didn't even know why, except that, to actually repeat what William just said, Calderon had a knowledge that was different. And I sensed that from the very beginning. And there was a part of me that really yearned for that. I remember it was either the first or the second time that I saw him. I don't remember which it was. And he had this little room that was a room that he had built onto the house for reunions and spiritual direction. And I remember he was sitting opposite me, or I was sitting opposite him. And he says, well, in Cafh, you can give your time, you can give your energy, or you can give your whole life. What do you want to do? And it was then that I knew this is for life. Now, don't ask me how I knew it or why I knew it, because I could never tell you, but I knew this is my life. And I just kind of looked at him and I pointed and at the table where he had gestured life. And I remember thinking, Cafh is something serious. This is a serious path. Now, you remember this is the time of the hippies, the communes, the, riding around and the hitchhiking and the psychedelic drugs and all of those things. There were so many possible experiences and experiments and group living situations. None of that had really attracted me. But when Calderon said there was an invitation, I knew. Well, very shortly thereafter, he called and said, well, there's somebody I want you to meet. This is Calderon calling. He called or got in contact with me. We didn't have cell phones at the time, so I'm not even sure how he got in contact with me. And so I go again to this same room, and I go in. There is a person there, kind of tall, very stoic, almost severe, laconic, not too many words. And I didn't really know how to make conversation. I was just like, what next? And he says to me, well, for you, what is renouncement? I kind of looked at him and I said, well, renouncement is leaving this and not doing that. And if you like it, you give it up, and a whole long list of things. And then I stopped and I said, well, I just gave you a long list of things. I've said a lot of things, but in truth, I don't know what renouncement is. And he turned and he said, after 20 years on the path, I don't know what it is either. This was Senor Eduardo. It was the first time I met him. Senor Eduardo is, I would say, a Cafh legend. I had no idea why I was meeting with him. In retrospect, I think he was checking me out. Is it for real? Is there somebody who's really interested in going to the community? And at that time, I didn't even know I was interested in going to the community. Calderon told me, he said, why don't you write a letter to the director of Cafh? Explaining to him what you want to do. I said, okay. So with my Spanish, I wrote a letter, but I didn't really know. I didn't know anything about Cafh. I just sensed, I had that knowing without knowing that this was serious, that this was important, that this was my path. And I wrote in this short letter, I said, well, I am willing and ready to either go to the community that I had just heard about, or to do whatever else you think I should do. In other words, it's up to you. He was the director of Cafh, let him decide. And the next thing I know, it must have been not more than a week later, I was called again to meet somebody. And it was actually Senor Jorge this time, who asked me, he said, well, you can go to the community and okay, you can go to the community here in Cali, or you can go to California. And I said, well, I don't know, you decide. I'm here to offer my life. You decide where I should go. Then he kind of looks at me very serious like, says, well, I'm going to send you someplace that's going to be very difficult for you. And he sent me to Montebello, to California. At the moment, I had no idea why he said that. Afterwards, I realized why he said that, but that was hindsight. Also at that time, so I was preparing to go to the community. I had been in Cafh like 2 weeks. And I remember one of my friends was really upset, you know, why are you going to do that? Why are you going to close yourself off somewhere? You don't even know what it's about. You don't even know what they want you to do. And she was really upset. And I was thinking, well, what can I say? What can I do? How can I help her to understand? Because I don't really understand to explain it. And I thought to myself, well, this for me is forever. This is for life. But I said to her, look, I'm just going to try. If it doesn't work, the door is open, I'll leave. But I'm just going to try. This seems like it could be a fit. It seems like what I want. And she was okay with that. But it was very interesting because it was also a moment when I realized no matter what anybody else said, no matter what anybody else thought, I knew this is what I had to do. I couldn't explain it, I just knew that this was it. And I also realized in retrospect that when I went to the community, I left in February of 1973. It was also like a great adventure. It was like I was being called or being shown an open door to a great mystery, to the unknown. It's like, here, go. You've been prepared your whole life for this. Go. The moment is now. And so I went. Rodrigo drove me to the airport. And it was like, okay, here we are. When I arrived at the community, it was really kind of interesting. I mean, you know, there are all of those details that are the funny things that you don't give too much importance to. I remember Senor Jorge saying to me in that meeting I had, okay, but don't even think of taking a cab, you know, taking a taxi. They'll pick you up. Don't even think about it. Then I realized afterwards, you know, how far away the airport was from where the community was. But they also, you know, we were living, a lot of us were living together in a house, and we were really good friends. It was a very nice, congenial atmosphere. We were friendly, a lot of teasing, just a lot of being together. And I had I guess, a reputation for not being a very good cook, and or never even setting foot in the kitchen. And I remember being teased, well, when you get to the community, the first thing they're going to do is send you to the kitchen. And we said, no, they wouldn't really want to do that. You know, we laughed about it. Well, wouldn't you know, the first day I arrived Saturday night, Sunday morning, I'm told, yes, and you are going to the kitchen, you're going to cook. And I started laughing. I couldn't help it. I just started laughing. And they thought I was being disrespectful, but it really wasn't. It was just so funny. We had just had this, you know, conversation. And this is the time where, you know, you read about Milarepa and all of those, you know, the yogis and all of the things that the aspirants, the neophytes, the people who aspire to their path, what they went through. So it was just one of the very funny things that that happened on that first day.
Were there some difficulties?
Pardon?
Were there some difficulties you encountered there as well?
Oh, yeah. It's very, very, I don't even know how to describe it, because it's like entering a world, an unknown world. And I think that, and as already been mentioned, you know, there's a lot of discipline. There's a lot of observance, norms, and everything in community was designed for us, for each one to die to ourselves, to go beyond that personality, to go beyond that external persona that limits me, each of us, that limits to a certain way of thinking and feeling and processing information and understanding. But the process is not an easy process, because that coming face to face with an idea that I may think I really believe that, or a feeling that I really identify with. And that becomes, or can become, a real hurdle. So the part of the process, I think, of adapting to community is learning how to work through those things. To maybe I'll never even understand it, but to put it into a certain perspective and to realize, what is my goal? Why am I here? What is this all about? And in my own particular journey, at some point, I understood in some part of my being that no matter what happened, this was so much more important than anything that I could understand with my mind, or experience, or things I might disagree with. There were many times I did not understand, okay, why do we do this or why do we do that? But it didn't matter, because I knew this is taking me to a different place. This is taking me on that journey that I really yearn for, why I'm here. Now, we talked in Cafh about realization and the Divine Mother. I don't know. Those seem to be very big words. And the one thing that I think still sustains me in a certain way is the mystery of it all. That we are a very, very small part of this incredible mystery that is life, that is community life, that is Cafh. It's something I don't think that I'll ever be able to understand, especially if I try to do it with my mind.
Thank you, Madeline. It's very interesting. And I'm hearing a little trend here of an understanding that is very deep and not so explainable. So I was wondering, Leonard, if you could just continue telling us a little more about your first experiences in the community or with the people who were helping you there in Cali.
Okay, so I'll echo some of the things that have been said. Madeline was talking about how serious Cafh was. For me, even the way Calderon would say Cafh, it was with such reverence. And Cafh was never and isn't just an institution, a method. It's something much more than I can perceive or grasp at all. So maybe it's the path itself, I don't know. But it was of that kind of a relationship. When I was traveling, and I still do, okay, there's a little Sufi poem I would tell myself, just to give you an idea of the connection I felt, not only with everybody, but particularly in some way with a current of beings who had somehow stood out in the way they gave their lives over time in the epics. It was, I'll try and say it. They say we came in vain. Let it not be we came in vain. We finished what we could. We left the rest to you. Remember, beloved, this is a work entrusted. Remember, beloved, we shall meet again. And there was something of that. So it wasn't only Calderon. when I was there before I entered the community, I met with the Cavanesias family in Bogota, the Kirbys in Medellin, many other sons and daughters. Again, I was very sick. I was in the hospital, Senor Eduardo. Somebody in the bed next to me, or just a couple of beds over there, had just had a he had a tracheotomy, and the thing had sawed through his throat, and there was blood all over while he died, and everybody was in shock. And Eduardo came up while I was sort of trying to meditate and throw the I Ching and everything, and we talked. And I felt like he was something, it's inexpressible, like out of a dream. Like somehow we had always known each other. And we talked, and just like with Rodrigo and Michael, he mentioned the community, he mentioned mysticism. Later I met with Senor Jorge. He had been called by Calderon. I guess my understanding, I don't know if somebody told me or I just assumed that, you know, Calderon didn't know what do I do with all these gringos that are appearing out of nowhere? Help. And Senor Jorge came and he had meetings with us one after the other. Some felt so scared that they would be hypnotized or something. They didn't want to come. Others, we went. And so this pair went and got, you know, they got married. This pair stayed. This other one went to California to the community. Madeline went to, you know, to the community there. He told me I could go to the community, but not immediately. I had to wait till after my birthday in a few months. Somehow I connected with him. I don't know why. Again, I felt like I had always known him, like he was part of my family. He said, now, if you're going to the community, remember, it's like getting on a plane. Once you're on a plane, you just don't open the door and walk out. You have to, you know, you stay. And I understood, and I was sick. I never thought I would live that long. I thought really that I would die shortly. I was working under a deadline, and while traveling, there was always kind of the idea that I had, like a pact, an unspoken pact, I guess, with people, that if you find something, let me know. If I find, I'll let you know. I don't know how we were supposed to let each other know. There was no contact, but Calderon sort of fed that fuel, fed that fire, you know, and I tried to contact everybody I could because I didn't know if I would be able to ever contact anybody again and let them know what I had found. They must have thought I was really, really crazy. I don't think I was a fanatic, you know, who knows? But anyway, so then there's the community, and it's like on a really hot day, you see this pond that's of cool, refreshing water. And you go and you jump in, and wow, that was just freezing cold. And I entered in shock. And I'm still in shock 40, 50 years later. It was just, I don't know what I was expecting, some combination of romantic images and this and that. Partly was what I found, but partly was different. Another image is like everything before had been like you're working yourself through a birth canal, and you know there's a little bit of light over there, and you think that, okay, I'm going to get to the end of the birth canal, everything will be cool. And you say, ah, and you're just screaming because it's the end of birth, but it's the beginning of a new life, and you have to figure everything out from the beginning, and that's what it's been. When people come to the community or they pass through, they say how beautiful, I love it, everything else, but they say that because they're only here a few days. But after a few days or a few months, you don't even see the beauty. It's just everyday life. And unless somebody awakens to you, I think Suzuki Roshi said for a mother, having kids is nothing special. But of course, it's a complete miracle. But she gets used to it day after day, just, you know, taking care of the kids. And it's like that. working through every day. And I guess, like Madeline suggested and some of the others, um, I don't know how I stood it. I don't know how I stand it now. It rubs me wrong in every way. It's like, I once tried to say, it's like being a square peg trying to fit in a round hole. You get rubbed a lot, and I got rubbed every which way, and everything in me wanted to split, to disappear, but there was nowhere to go back to. I'd burnt all my bridges. And something in me that I don't know what it is, I'll never be able to explain it. Or I don't know, maybe after I die, how do I know? I can't now. Um, had decided and was locked onto it and was holding on for dear life. And it said, it's settled, and that's it. And when I was traveling, I was looking into the eyes of thousands of people, and I just felt I had to respond, and I didn't know how to respond. And I still don't exactly, but being here is how I respond. And if I was to go back on that, I feel I would, that would be the cop out. I would be betraying people, and I couldn't look them in the eyes anymore. So somehow
Thank
that's
you,
kept me
Lynn.
going.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So many wonderful images you shared. Um, and I just want to continue here so we don't run out of time. Because Paulette, I know we heard from you a little while back, and we want to continue with this question, like how you can describe, if you can remember your experiences in the community or when you encountered Cafh, how that um, how that tied into whatever you were searching for before, and the people maybe just in general.
Sure. I'm going to go back a little bit. Um, when I entered college, I was 18, and I had been kind of sheltered. And so when I got to college, it was 1969. It was there was a lot going on that I had not been exposed to. And one of the things was there was a great deal of anti-war activism and activism in general. Uh, where I was, they burned the bank and protests and the war, and there was a lot of marches and things, and a lot of the professors were very involved too. So I was, it awakened me to question what was going on in the world and question the establishment and the way things have been done. That idealism of youth. But there was also, at the same time, going on a great deal of interest in Eastern mysticism. Uh, so I remember taking a lot of courses in religious studies, because I was interested personally in that, because I just knew the religion I grew up in, which was Catholicism. So I had those two things in mind, and one of the things I noticed among the people uh, that I worked in a child care center. I was in a work study program, and there were adults there. I was a young person, and there were people who had kids, but they were very active in the anti-war movement. But their lives were very, how should we say, they there was a lot of, um, they didn't seem to have things together. They were very, very committed to a cause, but in their own personal lives, things were messy, and they hadn't resolved them. And just about everybody was like that. So I thought I thought to myself, well, I could recognize that there was this personal work that had to be done, not just a general social work, but individual work. I had to work on myself. Um, so then after a couple of years, when I found Cafh, I thought, well, I had really been attracted to the idea of renunciation in the Hindu religion, and one of the things, I was a Westerner. There's a Western path that talks about this idea that originated in me. And in a way, I could say that the idea of renouncement is what has sustained me all these years, because it seems to me like Well, if I have the ideal of renouncement, it reminds me that I don't live for myself, which is an ideal we have in the community, or anybody who's taken a vow of renunciation to themselves. My life isn't mine. I've renounced already. Uh, so every difficulty I have, every challenge I have, can be measured against my own ability to renounce. And it takes on over the 50 years I've been practicing this. It takes on different nuances as time goes by. But it's a very clear-cut idea in a world that's full of confusing things. We see in Cafh, we are a cross-section of humanity. We aren't perfect, things happen. And for me, it's been very disillusioning to see these things. But at the same time, I recognize that this is why we have this ideal. An ideal which I think is way beyond, I think it's far in advance of where the world is, far in advance of where we are, human beings are. And yet we are compelled, I would say, to strive to live it. So, so that's one thing. And so many of the things that Madeline, William, and Leonard said, I really share with them. One of the things that happened to me is that I am not a mystical person. I'm also not I'm a very suspicious person, and I don't join things. I didn't join things. So it was very unusual for me to want to join this path, which I wanted to do immediately. I didn't understand what they were saying. Everything was written in Spanish. I couldn't understand my own delegate. We couldn't really communicate. When Senor Jorge came, when the sons were talking about his visit, he talked to me in English. That was great. So it's a mystery of how I just knew this was for me, how I could connect with it, how I could decide to make such a big step to go to the community. But I knew it was the community meant you just dedicated your whole life to this. I was in a hurry. I wanted to do this. I wanted to I wanted to get my life together. And I also wanted to combine it with this idea of thinking that this was something that would help the world. If I could work on my own folding, if I could transform myself, this was one person, of course, only, but it was something that I believe every human being has to do eventually, the work that we're doing. So that's really all I want to say.
And you had mentioned that you knew you wanted to go into community, but they didn't want to let you in right away.
I don't remember exactly when we heard about the community, but that was what I wanted, was the community. So, so I must have met Senor Jorge in January of 1973, and when I did, I told him I wanted. I hadn't even entered Cafh yet. He met with me even though I was an aspirant. He said, "Did you fill out the questionnaire?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you can enter Cafh." And I said, "But I want to go to the community." And he said, "Well, I'm, in that sweet way, he says, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait." And I did have to wait for about 9 months, but they did. I persisted. Also, not a great characteristic of mine, but I was sure I wanted to do this, and then finally they said yes. And it really is my place. I mean, it's where I belong. I know it's not perfect. I know it's not easy, as everybody has been saying. I face all the same challenges, but it's really right for me. It's my vocation, and it's just right.
I'm glad you persisted. Thank you. Lourdes?
Yes, I have a last question. Yes, something because there are so many changes now in the world, and what keeps you going? A brief answer, yes, because we are short of time. We are going to ask Leonard first.
Well, the short answer is damned if I know, really. Sorry. it's really hard to say. It's hard to know. Uh, a lot of stuff we've already kind of said before, I think, but I don't want to expand much more beyond your question. Something in me, I don't know what it is or how and you know, has somehow decided that. I don't know that. Hopefully that lasts the rest of my life, but it's really who could even say, you know. Um, I'll the only thing that occurs to me to answer your question that was kind of isolated from the rest of the things we were talking about, and maybe you'll have some other questions later. I'll share a I'll share a dream, and it was a gift to me, and I'll give it to all of you. So uh, I suppose sometimes you've experienced like um, a dream of flying, you know, or you feel you're flying. So at some moment I was flying, and I was flying over, as I remember it, more or less, or remember what I told myself I remembered, over multitudes of people who were all like reaching out to me. And somehow I had whatever I had, I gave to them, um, food, gifts, whatever, and they took it and they still reached out. And I finally had nothing. The only thing I had was my ring, and I gave them to, and gave that to them. And as soon as I gave it, the ring was back on my finger, but brighter. And I gave it again. Again, it was back on my finger and brighter. And I kept doing that until it was like a sun on my finger. And I gave it again, and there I was, naked of everything, but with the divine. And pretty hard to explain, but there's that tie. I mean, I'm not really even particularly interested in unfolding for myself. As I conceive it, unfolding is everybody, is everything. And every little bit that one can unfold is tied to everybody else. And I can't seem to turn away from that. I can't seem to ignore that knowledge. I can't pretend like I don't know that, even though, believe me, parts of me would like to very much every day wrestle with that uh, uh, deep discomfort of having to deal with life and you know, all the things that really bother me personally. But there's something else that's totally beyond that.
Thank you. Very profound, because sometimes in the dreams we realize what keeps us going. And for you is your love for souls. I can see it. And Paulette?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think after so many years, you just keep doing what you're doing. So, and I think there's a value in that. I remember many years ago reading, it was an article in which they interviewed mass, you know, spiritual leaders. And what I remember best was what Ram Dass said. And he said something like, it doesn't matter what path you choose, pick one and stick to it. And I thought there was a lot of value in that. I think probably I'd been in Cafh about 20 years by that time. That, you know, you don't have all that much time. Of course, you know, so that's one thing. We don't have that many years in life. So there's a lot of, in anything, pick something, do it till the end. But I have to say that really I was taught, and I was to think of my choice to go to the community was a lifetime choice. Yes, I was taking a temporary vow, but for me it was for life. That's the commitment I made, and I got a chance to renew it over and over with my vows, and my vows do sustain me. Now I couldn't imagine any other life, uh, but at the same time, I have the joy of never ever having regretted what I decided to do when I was young. Um, you know, you don't know a lot when you're young, and you're not sure. You're not sure if you can do it. I wasn't sure at all if I could persevere. Um, so it's amazing to me, and I think it's not all that common to be completely satisfied with the choice I made and to have the privilege to keep doing it.
Thank you. I see the perseverance and the commitment is what keeps you going. And I'm wondering, William, you want to tell us what keeps you going?
I'll go back. Leonard reminded me this morning of this dream that I've told him about before. I'm not a big believer in dreams, but this is a very simple one. And I don't know how many years after starting in the community, I had a dream with the delegate who was Antonio, Senor Antonio, who's now in San Ignacio in Argentina. And in the dream, he told me, you know, everybody lives in community. They just don't realize it. And for me, that's, you know, all the dynamic that happens in the community is the dynamic that happens everywhere. The personal work. And that's something that, you know, it is tied into everybody else. It's not like we live in the community and we do this special thing and, you know, it's not really connected. We're all in this bubble or something. It's really, it's the work of the soul, and it's the work that everybody does or should do or has to do. So it's very connected. There's a, you know, sometimes there's this dichotomy, the community and then the world or whatever, and it's not like that really. So it's a connection with everybody through that. The idea that you have to unfold, you have to work through things, you have to overcome just all the exact same things that everybody else has to do, and you see it through the whole world. So it's not at all removed from just because we live in the community doesn't mean, it actually means we're closer to everybody else in a sense, you know. And that's what makes it meaningful for me.
I can see is the participation with all souls. We're doing the inner work. Thank you, William. And Madeline?
Thank you. I was just remembering that when I first entered the community, I looked around and I was alone. I was the only seminarian. And I realized I was the first one. I didn't know. And I realized and I thought, wow, it's all on me. It's on me to make it happen. It's not all about me, but it's on me. It was that commitment, that kind of knowing, I need to do this. I need to make it happen. I need to embrace this place of helping create the seminary of community in the United States. And one of the things, I have since come across a quote. It's attributed to Rumi, but it's very simple. It goes like this: the path is yours and yours alone. Others may walk it with you, but no one can walk it for you. So no matter what anybody else does, it's like I own my own path. I'm responsible for my commitment and for what I do. And that is an idea or a thought that I often return to.
Thank you. Very inspiring. Lynn?
Yes. Well, we've come to the end of our interview, and I want to thank Madeline, Paulette, William, and Leonard so much for sharing your stories, but sharing your lives. I was deeply moved in many instances with what you told us and your experiences. It was, like I said, inspiring and a real delight to be able to spend this time with you. Lourdes?
Yes, I continue being amazed of how you met all together at the same time, coming from all different places. And it's like for me, it's a whole mystery, coincidence, some will say, just to be in Cali at the right time, at the right moment, and finding so many beautiful souls there that accompany you there, that listen to you, to your heart, that were able to help you to find your place in the world, and especially in community setting. And it was you are inspiring us to see that the inner work is not this way or this way. It's completely unique, individual, and each of you are a standard of that. So I want to say thank you for giving every hour of your life and out of love. Thank you. Thank you to each of you. And now I would like to invite Libby and Dale to complete our Living History event today.
Thank you to everyone. And it is obvious to all that the thing that we need to acknowledge first is the presence of the Divine Mother in all of our lives that brings us together today. A special thank you to Madeline and Paulette, William and Leonard for sharing your journey with us. We also want to thank the spiritual director of Cafh, Ana Cristina Flor, whose support made this project possible. The entire Living History team appreciates the offering of time and energy of all the participants. So thank you.
We also thank you for listening to this the interview and for your presence and interest and your participation. And we are asking you to please fill out the evaluation form in the chat area, as this will help us for future episodes. And I myself am looking forward to seeing the YouTube video of this so that I can cry my eyes out and drop the facade of the silent strong type. We will now